The gold standard acted as a silent watchdog to prevent unlimited public spending. Get it, Warren? Monday, September 6, 2021, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. We get bogged down a lot on the price of gold, the price of silver, but today I want to talk about something more important than prices, and it's how gold is so important to human freedom. And we're going to look at an old speech by a congressman back in the late 40s. And I think it's more important than ever with what's going on today in the world, especially since this crisis started last year. Yes, freedom, economic freedom, they seem to be slipping away very quickly from us. And it's one of the reasons for my channel is not just to teach or to try to inform people about economics, sound money, and be a contrarian. It's about hopefully helping people maintain a little bit of freedom, economic freedom. And that's why I never talk much about politics, because who cares about politics if you have freedom and economic freedom, right? And before I start today and get into the subject of gold and freedom, just wanted to recommend a really good interview. One of my viewers sent me this link. It's always nice how I get a lot of my material from the viewers, the people who follow me. And if you want to send me private messages, you will need to join my Patreon account so you can send me the private messages. I don't have too many Patreon members. I don't do special videos on Patreon. It's just there so people can contact me directly. The minimum that you have to contribute there is $1 a month. So there's some links below in the description of all my videos of how you can support the channel, not just through Patreon, but through PayPal and other avenues. But the video is Aldous Huxley interviewed by Mike Wallace in 1958. I highly recommend this. Aldous Huxley, he was very prescient, very clever individual, and he warned us about freedom. He even quoted Thomas Jefferson about eternal vigilance being the price of freedom. And he talked a lot about technology, how it could be a good thing, but also an instrument used by people that thirst for power to enslave the public. And I think that's where we are right now. And the other reason why I'm talking about freedom today is because I saw this post by Rick Rule on LinkedIn, and he retweeted or relinked, I don't know how you call it, something by Real Vision, and it's a quote by Warren Buffett. And it says, "I could end the deficit in 5 minutes. You just pass a law that says that anytime there is a deficit of more than 3% of GDP, all sitting members of Congress are ineligible for re-election." That's Warren Buffett. And I thought to myself, well, Warren Buffett, he should know better. He should know what his father, Howard Buffett, wrote back in 1948. He was a congressman from Nebraska, and I think it's the best economic, political, so to speak, essay that I've ever seen to do with freedom. I think it's even better than Greenspan's Golden Economic Freedom, because Congressman Buffett actually talks about human freedom and gold. So the thing that I would tell Warren Buffett is, would turkeys vote for Christmas? So already this is, it would take, they wouldn't even consider voting on this. And why 3% of GDP deficit? More than, why not no deficits, right? So, because 3% still allows them to inflate let's say at 2.9% every year. So I think Warren Buffett is being very, he's not being truthful with people. He loves the big government and the fiat currency. So let's get to what his father said, which I think is much more important. Unfortunately, most people, when they think of the Buffett family, they think of Warren Buffett. And Howard Buffett actually is Warren Buffett's son, Howard Buffett Jr. But the really important Buffett in my book is Howard Buffett Sr., U.S. Congressman from Nebraska. And yes, this is what he wrote. Human freedom rests on gold redeemable money. I would say it also rests on abolishing the Federal Reserve, because the Federal Reserve is the other arm of this mechanism of enslaving the public through deficit financing. They make it possible that Uncle Sam runs these deficits, and not just in the United States, but everywhere around the world, of course. Central banks, we need to get rid of them. We need to go to back to where the public, the people control the money, not politicians and central bankers. Central bankers, of course, a monopoly created by the politicians for the bankers, and they scratch each other's back. So enough of my rambling. Let's get to what Howard Buffett said. So it's reprinted from the Commercial and Financial Chronicle, May 6th, 1948. Is there a connection between human freedom and a gold redeemable money? At first glance, it would seem that money belongs to the world of economics and human freedom to the political sphere. But when you recall that one of the first moves by Lenin, Mussolini, and Hitler was to outlaw individual ownership of gold, you begin to sense that there may be some connection between money, redeemable in gold, and the rare prize known as human liberty. Also, when you find that Lenin declared and demonstrated that a sure way to overturn the existing social order and bring about communism was by printing press paper money, then again, you are impressed with the possibility of a relationship between a gold-backed money and human freedom. I guess in this day and age, we're moving to central bank digital currencies. I would say that is just as bad as printing press paper money. In that case, then certainly you and I as Americans should know the connection. We must find it, even if money is a difficult and tricky subject. I suppose that if most people were asked for their views on money, the almost universal answer would be that they didn't have enough of it. Very true. In a free country, the monetary unit rests upon a fixed foundation of gold or gold and silver, independent of the ruling politicians. Our dollar was that kind of money before 1933. Under that system, paper currency is redeemable for a certain weight of gold at the free option and choice of the holder of paper money. Redemption rights ensures stability. That redemption right gives money a large degree of stability. The owner of such gold redeemable currency has economic independence. He can move around either within or without his country because his money holdings have accepted value anywhere. Unfortunately, we can't move around these days freely as we could up until 2019. My only hope is that this nightmare ends, that we see the Fed dissolve into nothingness, and all the other central banks as well, and gold and silver come back to the fore. That's unfortunately the only way I see things improving in terms of human freedom. For example, I hold here what is called a $20 gold piece. Before 1933, if you possessed paper money, you could exchange it at your option for gold coin. This gold coin had a recognizable and definite value all over the world. It does so today. In most countries of the world, this gold piece, if you have enough of them, will give you much independence. So again, the price, in a fiat currency that we live, seems very important, but I think it's this independence is much more important. And that's why I'll keep trying to stack gold and silver as much as possible. But today, the ownership of such gold pieces as money in this country, Russia, and all diverse other places is outlawed. So this was, of course, before 1975 that he wrote that. The subject of a Hitler or a Stalin is a serf by the mere fact that this money can be called in and depreciated at the whim of his rulers. Well, nowadays, they don't even have to call it in. They can just depreciate it like they're doing through deficit spending. Mr. Warren Buffett. That actually happened in Russia a few months ago when the Russian people holding cash had to turn it in, 10 old rubles, and receive back 1 new ruble. And it could be the same thing they would do nowadays. You will receive 1 new digital dollar for maybe 10 old dollars. They could do that. That's how they will extract wealth from you. If you, of course, keep holding fiat currency. I hold here a small packet of this second kind of money, printing press paper money, technically known as fiat money because its value is arbitrarily fixed by rules or statutes. The amount of this money in numerals is very large. This little packet amounts to 680,000 CNC. I think is the Chinese money he's talking about, currency. It costs me $5 at regular exchange rates. I understand I got clipped on the deal. I could have gotten 2.5 million Chinese dollars if I had purchased it in the black market. But you can readily see that this Chinese money, which is a fine grade of paper money, gives the individual who owns it no independence because it has no redemptive value. What does redemptive value mean? Well, it means that you can redeem the banknote, the paper money, or the digital dollar for something of real value. In the past, it was gold and silver, or it could be seashells, or it could be a nice fillet steak, or it could be anything else. And that's why this system is so rotten, because if you took a Federal Reserve note or a Bank of England note or a Euro note to the bank and said, I want to redeem that, they would think you're crazy today. They would say, well, we can give you a new one if that one is damaged. So it's an empty promise. Yes, of course, amongst ourselves, we can pay bills with that, but it's just like a Ponzi scheme. There's no redemptive value to it. Under such conditions, the individual citizen is deprived of freedom of movement. He is prevented from laying away purchasing power for the future. He becomes dependent upon the goodwill of the politicians for his daily bread. Unless he lives on land that will sustain him, freedom for him does not exist. You have heard a lot of oratory on inflation from politicians in both parties. Actually, that oratory and the inflation maneuvering around here are mostly sly efforts designed to lay the blame on the other party's doorstep. And I would add the central banks to this now, the Federal Reserve. They want to add blame to anything else but themselves. All our politicians regularly announce their intention to stop inflation. I believe I can show that until they move to restore your right to own gold, that talk is hogwash. The other thing I would say, you can have rising prices under a gold redeemable system. Yes, you could. If there is a unusual inflow of gold into the local economy or into the national economy, you can see prices rising. But and that in of itself is inflation because the money supply has been inflated by more gold. But that happens not because politicians decide it to happen, and it can never get out of control, of course, because there isn't any endless amount of gold out there, even though some people think we can mine for it in asteroids, which is completely unrealistic, I would say. Paper systems end in collapse. Here we go. But first, let me clear away a bit of underbrush. I will not take time to review the history of paper money experiments. So far as I can discover, paper money systems have always wound up with collapse and economic chaos. And I think we're right in it right now, the economic chaos. Yes, they're using this crisis as an excuse, but no, it's the chaos that we're entering, the economic chaos. Here somebody might like to interrupt and ask if we are now on the gold standard. That is true internationally, but not domestically. So we were still under the Bretton Woods system, gold exchange system. It wasn't really a true gold standard. Even though there is a lot of gold buried down at Fort Knox, that gold is not subject to demand by American citizens. It could all be shipped out of this country without the people having any chance to prevent it. That is not probable in the near future, for a small trickle of gold is still coming in. But it can happen in the future. This gold is temporarily and theoretically partial security for our paper currency, but in reality it is not. Also, currently we are enjoying a large surplus in tax revenues, but this happy condition is only a phenomenon of post-war inflation in our global WPA. It cannot be relied upon as an accurate gauge of our financial condition, so we should disregard the current flush Treasury in considering this problem. And he was right, because 25 years later, the whole Bretton Woods Agreement collapsed. From 1930 to 1946, your government went into the red every year, and the debt steadily mounted. Various plans have been proposed to reverse this spiral of debt. One is that a fixed amount of tax revenue each year would go for debt reduction. Another is that Congress be prohibited by statute from appropriating more than anticipated revenues in peacetime. Still another is that 10% of the taxes be set aside each year for debt reduction. All of these proposals look good, but they are unrealistic under our paper money system. Warren Buffett, read your dad's article. They will not stand against post-war spending pressures. The accuracy of this conclusion has already been demonstrated. Yes, this video is going on a long time, but we need to understand that freedom demands eternal vigilance. So if you can't spend 20 or 30 minutes listening to this video, then I would say you don't really care about those things. Anyway, the budget and paper money. Under the Streamlining Act passed by Congress in 1946, the Senate and the House were required to fix a maximum budget each year. In 1947, the Senate and the House could not reach an agreement on this maximum budget, so that law was ignored. So it just shows you how difficult it is to pass those kinds of laws controlling the budget. On March 4 this year, the House and Senate agreed a budget of $37.5 billion. Appropriations already passed or on the docket will most certainly take expenditures past the $40 billion mark. The statute providing for a maximum budget has fallen by the wayside. Even in the first 2 years it has been operating and in a period of prosperity. There's only one way that these spending pressures can be halted, and that is to restore the final decision on public spending to the producers of the nation, to the producers of wealth. Taxpayers must regain their right to obtain gold in exchange for the fruits of their labor. This restoration would give the people the final say-so on government spending and would enable wealth producers to control the issuance of paper money and bonds. I do not ask you to accept this contention outright, but if you look at the political facts of life, I think you will agree that this action is the only genuine cure. There is a parallel between business and politics which quickly illustrates the weakness in political control of money. Each of you is in business to make profits. If your firm does not make profits, it goes out of business. If I were to bring a product to you and say this item is splendid for your customers, but you would have to sell it without a profit or even at a loss, that would put you out of business. Well, I would get thrown out of your office, perhaps politely, but certainly quickly. Your business must have profits. In politics, votes have a similar vital importance to an elected official. That situation is not ideal, but it exists, probably because generally no one gives up power willingly. Perhaps you are right now saying to yourself, that's just what I have always thought. The politicians are thinking of votes when they ought to think about the future of the country. What we need is a Congress with some guts. If we elected a Congress with intestinal fortitude, it would stop the spending all right. I went to Washington with exactly that hope and belief, but I have had to discard it as unrealistic. Why? Because an economy congressman under our printing press money system is in the position of a fireman running into a burning building with a hose that is not connected with the water plug. His courage may be commendable, but he's not hooked up right at the other end of the line. So it is now with a congressman working for economy. And by economy, he means a sound system of economics, not the financial system we have today. There is no, or the financial economy, I would say, there is no sustained hookup with taxpayers to give him strength. When the people's right to restrain public spending by demanding gold coin was taken from them, the automatic flow of strength from the grassroots to enforce economy in Washington was disconnected. I'll come back to this later. So nowadays, even though it's legal again to own gold, they try to discourage people, of course, from doing so. They manipulate everything. In January, you heard the president's message to Congress, or at least you heard about it. It made Harry Hopkins in memory look like old Scrooge himself. Truman's State of the Union message was pie in the sky for everybody except business. These promises were to be expected under our paper currency system. Why? Because his continuance in office depends upon pleasing a majority of the pressure groups, lobbyists, Before you judge him too harshly for that performance, let us speculate on his thinking. Certainly he can persuade himself that the Republicans would do the same thing if they were in power. Already he has characterized our talk of economy as just conversation. To date, we have been proving him right. Neither the president nor the Republican Congress is under real compulsion to cut federal spending, and so neither one does so, and the people are largely helpless. But it was not always this way. Before 1933, the people themselves had an effective way to demand economy. Before 1933, whenever the people became disturbed over federal spending, they could go to the banks, redeem their paper currency in gold, and wait for common sense to return to Washington. So those of you who think Franklin Roosevelt was a great president, maybe for the political and banking class he was, but not for the general public. Raids on Treasury, that happened on various occasions and conditions sometimes became strained, but nothing occurred like the ultimate consequences of paper money inflation. Today, Congress is constantly besieged by minority groups seeking benefits from the public treasury. Often these groups control enough votes in many congressional districts to change the outcome of elections. And so congressmen find it difficult to persuade themselves not to give in to pressure groups. With no bad immediate consequences, it becomes expedient to accede to a spending demand. The Treasury is seemingly inexhaustible. Besides, the unorganized taxpayers back home may not notice this particular expenditure. So it goes. Let's take a quick look at just the payroll pressure elements. On June 10th, 1932, there were 2,196,151 people receiving regular monthly checks from the federal treasury. On June 30th, 1947, this number had risen to the fantastic total of 14,416,393 persons, and this number, of course, is mushroomed these days. This 14.5 million figure does not include around 2 million receiving either unemployment benefits of soil conservation checks. However, it includes about 2 million GIs getting schooling or on-the-job training. Excluding them, the total is about 12.5 million, or 500% more than in 1932. If each beneficiary accounted for 4 votes and only half exhibited this payroll allegiance response, this group would account for 25 million votes, almost by itself enough votes to win any national election. Besides these direct payroll voters, there are a large number of state, county, and local employees whose compensation in part comes from federal subsidies and grants and aid. Then there are many other kinds of pressure groups. There are businesses that are being enriched by national defense spending and foreign handouts. I would add the pharmaceuticals today. These firms, because of money they can spend on propaganda, may be the most dangerous of all, propaganda. And I would add Wall Street, the hedge funds today as well, private equity, all those groups. If the Marshall Plan meant $100 million worth of profitable business for your firm, wouldn't you invest a few thousands or so to successfully propagandize for the Marshall Plan? And if you were a foreign government getting billions, perhaps you could persuade your prospective suppliers here to lend a hand in putting that deal through Congress. So here's the important part, the one that he's left to the end. Taxpayer, the forgotten man. And I think by man he means the general public, not just men, but also women. Far away from Congress is the real forgotten man, the taxpayer who foots the bill. He is in a different spot from the tax eater or the business that makes millions from spending schemes. He cannot afford to spend his time trying to oppose federal expenditures. He has to earn his own living and carry the burden of taxes as well. But for most beneficiaries, a federal paycheck soon becomes vital in his life. He usually will spend his full energies, if necessary, to hang on to this income. The taxpayer is completely outmatched in such an unequal contest. Always heretofore, he possessed an equalizer. If government finances weren't run according to his idea of soundness, he had an individual right to protect himself by obtaining gold redemption. With a restoration of the gold standard, Congress would have to again resist handouts. That would work this way. If Congress seemed receptive to reckless spending schemes, depositors' demands over the country for gold would soon become serious. That alarm in turn would quickly be reflected in the halls of Congress. The legislators would learn from the banks back home and from the Treasury officials that confidence in the Treasury was endangered. Congress would be forced to confront spending demands with firmness. The gold standard acted as a silent watchdog to prevent unlimited public spending. Get it, Warren? I have only briefly outlined the inability of Congress to resist spending pressures during periods of prosperity. What Congress would do when a depression comes is a question I leave to your imagination. While we're in it now, Mr. Buffett. I have not time to portray the end of the road of all paper money experiments. It is worse than just high prices that you have heard about. Monetary chaos was followed in Germany by a Hitler, in Russia by all-out Bolshevism, and in other nations by more or less tyranny. It can take a nation to communism without external influences. Suppose the frugal savings of the humble people of America continue to deteriorate in the next 10 years as they have in the past 10 years. Someday people will almost certainly flock to a man on horseback who says he will stop inflation by price fixing, wage fixing, and rationing. When currency loses its exchange value, the process of production and distribution are demoralized. There you go. That's what's happening today. That's why we have all the supply chain problems. It's the money. It's not because of COVID. For example, we still have rent fixing and rental housing remains a desperate situation. For a long time, shrewd people have been quietly hoarding tangibles in one way or another. Eventually, this individual movement into tangibles will become a general stampede unless corrective measures or actions come soon. Is time propitious? Most opponents of free coinage of gold admit that restoration is essential, but claim that the time is not propitious. Yeah, people always say, oh, you can't do it. It's because they don't want to do it because they know what it means. Some argue that there would be a scramble for gold and our enormous gold reserves would soon be exhausted. Actually, this argument simply points up the case. If there is so little confidence in our currency that restoration of gold coin would cause our gold stocks to disappear, then we must act promptly. The danger was recently highlighted by Mr. Alan Sproul, president of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, who said, without our support, the Federal Reserve System, that is, under present conditions, almost any sale of government bonds undertaken for whatever purpose, laudable or otherwise, would be likely to find an almost bottomless market on the first day support was withdrawn. Unfortunately, that support is continuing in spades. Our finances will never be brought into order until Congress is compelled to do so. Making our money redeemable in gold will create this compulsion. The paper money disease has been a pleasant habit thus far and will not be dropped voluntarily any more than a dope user will without a struggle give up narcotics. But in each case, the end of the road is not a desirable prospect. I can find no evidence to support a hope that our fiat paper money venture will fare better ultimately than such experiments in other lands. Because of our economic strength, the paper money disease here may take many years to run its course. Yeah, he was right about that. But we can be approaching the critical stage. When that day arrives, our political rulers will probably find that foreign war and ruthless regimentation is the cunning alternative to domestic strife. That was the way out of the paper money economy of Hitler and others. In these remarks, I have only touched the high points of this problem. I hope that I have given you enough information to challenge you to make a serious study of it. I warn you that politicians of both parties will oppose the restoration of gold, although they may outwardly seemingly favor it. Also, those elements here and abroad who are getting rich from the continued American inflation will oppose a return to sound money. You must be prepared to meet their opposition intelligently and vigorously. They have had 15 years of unbroken victory. But unless you're willing to surrender your children and your country to galloping inflation, war, and slavery, then this cause demands your support. For if human liberty is to survive in America and the rest of the world, I would add, we must win the battle to restore honest money. There's no more important challenge facing us than this issue, the restoration of your freedom to secure gold in exchange for the fruits of your labors. And I would add silver as well to that. Yes, this was very long, but I think it's very important. And that's why I think this subject is more important than any other distraction out there that we have. And that's why I keep making my videos. So with that, let's quickly look at where the markets are this morning. It's almost 9 a.m. London time. We've got spot gold at 1825.80. I think we had some spikes and stops in the system that I watch. They have here a high of 1843, but I don't think we got up there overnight. And a low of 1816. Anyway, gold is fairly steady. Silver is up 7 cents at 24.80. High has been 24.87. The low 24.65. The Dow future is up 58. Nasdaq is up 45. S&P is up 7. The FTSE future is up 32. The pound is down 0.2% at 138.36. The euro is down about the same in percentage terms at 118.60. The dollar is up about 0.2 versus the yen at 109.88. And the dollar is up slightly as well against the yuan at 644.82. Aussie dollar is down 0.25% at 74.30, and the dollar is up 0.1% versus the Canadian dollar at 125.40. The Kiwi dollar is down 0.2 at 71.40. So it looks like the dollar is a little higher this morning. The fiat dollar, that is, of course. Nothing to do with real money. WTI crude is down 1% at 68.46. High-grade copper is down 0.4% at 431.50. Natural gas is up 0.5% at 475. And also carbon emissions is up 2%. So that's not good either. It's at 625. It's going to make prices even higher this winter, especially if we have a very cold winter in Europe and in the UK. I'm going to stop it here, and hopefully if you enjoyed this video, you're going to hit the like button, you're going to share it far and wide, you're going to think about subscribing to my channel if you haven't yet, and you might also want to follow me on all these other platforms here below, Rumble, Twitter, Facebook, and all the other ones. And yeah, I wish you all a great rest of the day. Take care. Bye.